Sir, can we
Yes, you can
start?
start.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Welcome back to the introductory session of this workshop. Our first speaker is Professor Shukanto Das. Professor Shukanto Das currently works as Associate Professor and Head of the Department of Information Technology of IST Shibpur. He received his PhD in 2007 from B College, Bengal Engineering and Science University, Shibpur, and Masters in Engineering in computers. He joined his alma mater as a faculty in 2003. He has been doing research in the different aspects of cellular automata for more than 20 years. His research area includes cellular automata theory and applications. He is also a member of IFIP Working Group 1.5 on cellular automata and discrete complex systems, and several programming committees for international conferences on cellular automata. He has more than 70 articles under his name. Currently, he is exploring the computational abilities of cellular automata, the non-uniform cellular automata, partial number conservation in cellular automata, and chaos and randomness in cellular automata. Apart from the research, Dr. Das is also an active member of the Science and Rationalist Association of India, a rationalist organization dedicated to advocate against pseudoscience, astrology, and mysticism. He is known for his active role in science awareness in common people and school children. Today, Professor Das will give a talk on Introduction to Cellular Automata. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Shubhanna, for your nice introduction. Well, and once again, welcome all the participants of this workshop in this session. So this is the first talk of this workshop. And this workshop, as you know, it's about cell automata. So where we shall cover some theoretical aspects of cell automata, then as application, we shall cover secured hardware design. So, so this talk is the basic talk, better to say, or introductory talk on cell automata. In this talk, we shall discuss some basic concepts, definition of cell automata, right? And more theory on cell automata will be discussed by other researchers and other presenters. I hope that this talk will help all of us to understand the very basic things of cellular automata. Okay. Now, to start with, let's first discuss lattice. What is lattice? So lattices are regular arrangements of points in Euclidean space. So this lattice is required to define a cell automaton. Formally, our d-dimensional lattice is a discrete additive subgroup of R to the power d, where R is set of reals. And that is a lattice L, if I say lattice L, is subset of R to the power d, and it satisfies two properties. First is this subgroup. See here, two properties are there: discreteness and subgroup, additive subgroup. So now, to be subgroup, as you know, L is to be closed under addition and subtraction. This first property. And second property is there exists an epsilon greater than 0, means positive epsilon, such that x minus y, the distance, is greater than equal to epsilon for any xy when x not equal to y. Means for any 2xy, their difference is always, positive. So this is the discreteness. So any lattice L has to satisfy this two property: discreteness and subgroup property. So as I've said, it is a discrete additive subgroup of R to the power D. So take an example. J to the power D is a lattice where Z is set of integers. Okay, so R is set of reals, as I've said, and Z is here set of integers. So here, because integer vectors, so each element of J to the power D, the vectors, integer vectors, they can be added as well as subtracted. And distance, if you take J to the power D, is always greater than equal to 1. So they can't be equal to 0. Okay. This is the discreteness property is also satisfied. As example, take D equal to 1. Then, so what I get, so Z only, so two integers, X and Y. Then X plus Y and X minus Y, they are also integers. And when X not equal to Y, difference between X minus Y, this is always greater than equal to Y. Greater than equal to 1. So if you consider some points in line, so integer points in line, so as you understand here, if d equal to 1, so the points are arranged in this fashion, right? Each box is a point, is an integer value, right? So here you understand that, okay, if you take any 2 point x and y as x and y, the difference is always, more than 0, 1 or more than 1. Similarly, if you take 2D, it will look like this one. Okay, so here, it's z square. Left hand side, what I've shown here, this is a z square. This is z square, right? Points are organized in this way, right? And here also, if you take 10 points, you'll see that difference between these 2 points is greater than 1. So therefore, J to the power D is a lattice. Now to define a cell automaton, we use this J to the power D, right? And better to say, so we take these points of J to the power D and place a finite automaton over that, over that point, right? If we can, put a finite automaton there, it becomes a cell automaton. That is defined formally. So cell automaton is a quadruple, J to the power D, S, M, R. There are 4 components, where J to the power D is D-dimensional lattice, which we call as cellular space, right? And S is a finite set of states, right? And M, see, M is a neighborhood vector, and M is equal to vector v1, vector v2, vector vm. It's called neighborhood vector. What is its implication? We'll learn. We'll cover it later. But okay, it's actually for each v of this lattice. See, each vector v of that lattice at the D. So v plus vi, that is always belongs to, a part of the D. This is obvious. But the important thing is, we call the cells v plus v, vector v plus vector vi for any I for 1 to m. They are some cells. These are called neighbors of cell v. So if such a vector is given for each cell, I can get some neighbors of the cells. And finally, R is a transition function. We sometimes call it nested function, or sometimes call it a local rule of the CA, which is applied on each cell, right? In each cell, we apply this R, and using that one, a cell moves from one state to another state. So what I get? We have our J to the power D lattice. In each place, we call it cell. In each cell, we place a finite automaton. Finite automaton, it has a nested function called R here, and it uses a finite state set S. So that is cell automaton. And and what is more here? The more point is, see, each cell, it depends on a cell of neighbors. To go to next state, it does not always depend on itself, or rather, it depends on its neighbors. So R, it has, you can see the rule R, it has m neighbors. The function R has it has s m number of inputs, where m is the number of neighbors of the cell. So obviously, It's a discrete system. Here space is discrete because z to the power d is a discrete, it's a discrete space, right? And time is also discrete. Why time is discrete? Because in each time step, each cell uses rule R to go to the next state. Then each cell applies the rule R simultaneously. Suppose it is t0. From t0, say time starts at t0, then by applying this R, I can get the next state of the cell, okay, and then from the next to next cell in this fashion. So from t0, then t1, then t2 in this way. So time and space both are discrete in cellular automaton. So cellular automaton is called also discrete dynamical system. Let us define another important term called configuration. Configuration of a CA. Configuration is nothing but a mapping that assigns states to the cells. See, each cell of the system, it may be any of the states, and A is the state set. It can assume any state, and configuration is that assignment. In other words, say when a system is running of any time, configuration is a collection of states. Being used by the cells. Now, since it's a mapping, I can have 12 number of such mappings, 12 number of configuration. We write it in this way: s to the power j to the power d is actually, it represents actually set of all functions from j to the power d to s. Right here, that set of all functions is actually set of all configurations. So j to the power s to the power j to the power d is set of all possible configurations. Now, from this one, I can get a function, global transition function, G. How I get it? See here what happens, since time and space both are discrete, a cell automaton, it hops from one configuration to another configuration. See, one time, say at time 0, all the cells are having some, some states. Now they apply the rule to go to the next state, and they apply the rule simultaneously. So from one configuration, it moves to another configuration. So as if the system is hopping from one to another, one configuration, another configuration, another configuration, and so on. So therefore, we can think of a function, global transition function G. We call it global transition function G, from whose domain is all possible configuration, and codomain is also all possible configuration. So it is called global transition function. See, G is not the CA. G we get, the global transition function we get from the cell automaton, the given cell automaton. And cell automaton is defined by j to the power d, S, M, and R. But what is then G? It's the derived one. We get G from the original definition. So G is not cell automaton in general. However, in many cases, we sometimes identify a cell automaton by this G. Now, what is the relation between this, G and R? Okay, so let me show that relationship. Suppose C dash is the next configuration of C. Okay, that I can write. And now this is a relationship. So C dash of V is a cell, V vector, V is a cell of my lattice, and I'm applying C dash 1. And this how I can get C dash of V? It is equal to, actually, see here what I've done. So for each V, I have found out the neighbors, V plus V1, vector V plus V2, vector V plus vector Vm, etc. And then I get the state of those neighbors. So I use C here. So I use C here, right? So by doing this, I can get state of all the neighbors of cell V. Then I apply R. So this is the present state of the neighbors in right hand side, and in left hand side the next state. So in this way we get next state, and in this way the configuration C dash, next configuration, and C, they are related, and this is a relation between G and R. So I have said that G is on the cell automaton, which is a derived one which we get from R. So let me briefly recall the history of cell automaton. It was actually developed by John von Neumann. He wanted to develop self-reproducing machines. Okay, he was thinking about on self-reproducing automata, and he he got suggestion from Stanislaw Ulam, and by getting the suggestion, he developed this kind of system called cell automaton, and he think of a system having two-dimensional infinite grid of square cells. In our word, a 2D lattice, right? And each cell is having 5 neighbors, like this one. See here, one is the middle cell, and then the blue cells are around the middle cell. So we say that they are the neighbors. Always what we do, in many cases what we do, a cell itself is considered neighbor of itself. I mean, a cell is always considered neighbor of itself. So in this way, 5 neighbors, the 4 orthogonal neighbors and itself. So 5 neighbors. And according to the proposal of von Neumann, he think of 29 states per cell. Okay, and what he showed that this model is capable of cell reproduction, and this model is as powerful as universal Turing machine. So this work, although he couldn't publish his work, before that he died, his students later and co-researchers, they later published this work. However, the point is, the simple model can do self-reproduction, which was his dream, to develop a self-reproducing machine, and then it has shown that it is as powerful as universal Turing machine. Now, although cell automaton was developed by von Neumann, and later of von Neumann, many workers like Bark, like Moore, they worked with cell automata. However, it was popularized by the great mathematician John Conway. And this is due to the Conway's game of life. Conway died in last year out of COVID-19 infection. So he's a great scientist who popularized this game of life cell automata, the name of game of life, in 1970. And the beauty of this game of life is it is two-dimensional system like von Neumann system, but here you have only 2 possible states, 0 and 1, or alive or dead. Okay, and here a cell is having 9 neighbors, including itself, and excluding itself, it is 8 neighbors. Okay, horizontally, vertically, and diagonally adjacent neighbors. Okay, so after the work of John Conway, really cell automata become very popular, and people started working with cell automata. And then after 1980s, after the work of Stephen Wolfram, it became very popular. So now, before going further, we shall briefly discuss the game of life to understand the working principle of a cellular automaton. So as I've said, game of life is nothing but a cell automaton with d equal to 2, here d equal to 2, and s equal to 0 and 1. We normally call 0 is dead, 1 is alive, and m the neighborhood vector. See here, this is the neighborhood vector. Okay, so 9 neighbors, excluding itself there are 8, but including itself it's 9 neighbors. See here, red cell, you can see the red cell is a cell itself. Okay, so here 0 0, suppose this cell is ij. So ij plus 0 0 is one cell, ij plus 0 1 is another neighbor, ij plus 1 1 another neighbor, ij plus 0 1 another neighbor. In this way, we can get 9 neighbors, right? We can get 9 neighbors here. So in this way, and see, ij can take any value of z to the power d, z to the power dr in z square. It can take any value. So in this way, each cell finds its neighbors and applies the rule. And what is the rule? Rule is h to the power 9 to s. So this is the form of rule. It takes all the inputs of its neighbors and go to the and then it goes to the next step. Now come to the rule definition. It's very interesting. See, name of the game is, or name of the cell automaton is game of life. There are 2 happenings: birth of cell and death of cell. Right? As I've said, A cell with state 0, we can call it is a dead cell. Cell with state 1, we can call it live cell. Now, BART is a cell that is in dead at time t will be alive at t plus 1 if exactly 3 of its neighbors were alive at time t. See here, while I am defining the rule, the cell considering the only eight other cells as its neighbors, right? In that way, the rule is written. Okay. So what is said? The BART, when a dead cell will become alive, it will become alive if exactly 3 of its 8 neighbors were alive at time t. Okay. And now when a cell will die, a cell can die by overpopulation or overcrowding. If a cell is alive at time t and 4 or more neighbors, see, out of 8 neighbors, so 4 or more, they're also alive, then the cell will die due to overpopulation. And a cell will die also in isolation or exposure if a live cell at time t has only one live neighbor or no live neighbor. Means the cell is having only one live neighbor but or no live neighbor. Then the cell will die next time step out of isolation. And third and the last point is survival. If a cell survive, if a cell is live, but it survives from time 2 to time t to time t plus 1, if only 2 or 3 of its neighbors are alive at t. And that's all. This is a rule is being followed by each cell. I believe you all appreciate the rule is very simple and very appealing. See, some way it is very appealing. When a cell will die and when a new cell will become alive, it's very, it matches with our common sense. Okay. Anyway, this is a rule definition of this game of life, and let us apply this rule. Consider this is my initial configuration. What is this? It's a black cell here. Here is a black cell, is the live cell, and the non-black and white-like cell, ash type cell, they are the dead cell. So here only few number of cells they're alive, and rest are dead. Okay. Now you apply this one. See what you can see here. See the topmost cell is live, but here only one neighbor is alive. So therefore, this particular cell, the topmost cell, should die out of isolation, the exposure rule, death by exposure. Similarly, if you consider this one, the corner cell, leftmost, rightmost corner cell, this one. Here, exactly 2 of its neighbors are active, are alive. So therefore, in next time step, this cell will continue as an alive as a live cell, right? So it will remain live. So this will become dead. This will live. And consider this one. Another example. Here you can see my mouse pointer, I guess. So here you can see one cell. It has 2. So this neighbor as it's live, and the lower neighbor is also live. So it has, and no, sorry, this is the 3 neighbors are as the live neighbors. They are alive. 3 neighbors are alive. So therefore, using the BART rule, this cell, this dead cell, will become live in next time step. So here you understand. The point is, all the cells apply the rule simultaneously. So after doing that one, you get this kind of pattern. Okay. Again apply. This is the next time step. You again apply. You get next time step. See, point is, all the cells are being updated. Apply this one. So you can see some kind of movement here. Yeah. Here what you can see? If you can recall, the original pattern was like this. It has again come back. But you have observed that some shifting was there. It has moved some places. So this is called a glider, which repeats itself every 4 iteration after having moved. So the beauty of thing is that all this is very simple, the rule is very simple, but when we apply them, we get some beautiful pattern. We can see that something is being moved, but there is no central control. It is not that I am simulating using some software. I am just updating the cells. So using this rule, I want to show you one simulation. Suppose this is my initial configuration. Okay, and if I start running using the same rule, I can see this kind of simulation. Note that there is no central control, as I've said. So I have given that initial configuration, and from that one, each cell is updating following the rule, and this kind of beautiful pattern is being generated. Okay, take another example. See here, initially you can see a pattern, a particular pattern you can see, and see black cells are live cells, as I've said before, but these black cells are forming a pattern. Let us run this one. See what you can see, after a few time steps, the same pattern comes back. Yeah, here. The same pattern comes, and then first from 1 pattern to 2 patterns, then 2 to 4 patterns. So as if the pattern is being replicated. This is the mathematical meaning of self-replication. So this is a self-replication which von Neumann want to simulate by some automaton. The point is a simple game of life where the rules are very simple. They can do this kind of self-replication. So in short, it's a 0-player game. Yeah, there is no intervention of any other. So 0-player game. You just set the initial configuration, then it will continue running. Then it has self-reproduction property and universal computation. It has property of self-organization with no central control. It's very important. As I've said, there is no central control. Each cell uses the same rule to update their state, and when they update, they don't know what is happening, what beauty is being created by the collective effort. This is very important, and you'll appreciate the rules are the rule is very simple, and this rule, its computational power is not very high, but the point is when they act together, they become as powerful as universal Turing machine. This is the beauty of this one, this automation. And next, evolution. Next to it, here evolution is dependent on initial configuration, as I've said. So initial configuration is the first thing which you give it as input, and then then it runs. So here the point is size of configuration is infinite. Size of configuration is infinite, and obviously I can theoretically say many things, but if you ask to simulate, you can't deal with infinite configuration, right? In fact, the example we have shown here, we have not dealt with infinite configuration. Yeah, the lattice was infinite, but only small part we have dealt the pattern formed by the black cells, that is finite. So we need that kind of finiteness, right? So actually, two special types of configurations are of our interest. One is called finite configurations, and another is called periodic configurations. Although by definition, configuration size is infinite, any cell can have any state, right? But for the purpose of simulation, we specially deal with two special types of configuration called finite configuration and periodic configuration. Let us briefly discuss what is finite configuration, what is periodic configuration. For finite configuration, let us define a state Q as quiescent state. State Q as quiescent state if R of Q is Q. If we apply rule R and all the elements of the inputs is q of the R, it remains as q. It shows some kind of stability. Now, what is finite configuration? Suppose q is the quiescent state. Then a configuration C is finite if only finite number of cells are in non-quiescent state. So practically size of configuration is infinite, but here my point is I want to deal with a finite amount of finite part, which is in non-quiescent state. I mean, which are in that part which are in non-quiescent state. So that kind of configurations are called finite configurations. Take an example. Suppose here, this is my 2D grid. All the cells are in state Q, but only the marked place, this is a non-quiescent state. They may be non-quiescent state. What will happen? If we apply if we apply the rule R in this part, outer part, it will always remain Q as Q. So you need not to consider them. But in which part is to be considered? It's marked part. Why? Because they are in non-quiescent state. So practically, if you want to simulate, you have to deal with finite part, right? Because you know the rest part is in quiescent, is in quiescent state. Is a theorem. If initial configuration of a C is finite, then the C remains in finite configuration forever. That is, if you start simulation with a finite configuration, no matter how much time the C runs, it will always remain in finite configuration. Right? Proof is very simple. Proof is very simple. Here, say you can use induction. Suppose at time t, this much cells are in finite are in non-quiescent state, right? Now at t plus 1 time, how many cells can be in non-quiescent state? Due to the property of quiescent state, only these much cells, see here a dark black line is there. Only this much cell will be in non-quiescent state, right? Because these cells, the borderline cells, they can have only some of neighbors. I mean, they may some of neighbors of the cells may be in non-quiescent state. So chance is that only these cells can be in non-quiescent state, not more than that. I'm not saying that all will be in quiescent state, but at most some of the states along the boundary can be non-quiescent state. So again, this is finite. Now, if we apply this logic in t plus 2, again only finite amount of cells may be added in this finite configuration. So always, so if you with one finite, you and another three finite numbers, it remains finite in this way. So this configuration size will always remain finite. This is very interesting, very important also. If you start with finite configuration, the Scalar automator will always remain in finite configurations. Okay. Now, let us consider CF is the set of all finite configurations. So suppose I am now classifying the configurations. I am choosing some configurations from the set of all configurations which are finite. So CF is a set of all finite configuration. So obviously CF proper subset of S to the power J to the power D, which is S to the power J to the power D is a set of all configurations. So now if I consider GF is the restriction on G on the finite configuration, then I get this one GF. So is CF to CF. So this is also important. So my global transition function was G. From that we get GF. From that we get GF, where GF is again a global transition function, but its domain and codomain, they are set of finite configurations only. Okay, as I've said, in case of game of life, we have dealt with only finite configurations, because if you simulate the system now, then you can't deal with infinite, as I've said before. Now come to the periodic configuration. To define periodic configuration, let us first define a seed function. That is nothing but a translation of configuration in a coordinate direction. Suppose sigma I is the sheet function in say direction I. So there are d sheet functions, one for each direction, sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma d. And here, say c dash equal to sigma, if I write c dash equal to sigma 1 of c, is nothing but c dash is the left shift of c. This is the meaning, right? Shift function means here we are using left shift in this case. If I say c dash equal to shift sigma 1 of c, it means it's the left shift of c. So now periodic configuration. A configuration is periodic if it is invariant under d linearly independent translations, right? So this is the meaning of periodic configuration. So give an example here. Okay, there are d positive integers, so t1, t2, td, such that c equal to sigma I applied ti times over c for every I 1 to d. So here t1, t2, td, these positive integers exist. Now if I apply them, if I apply say sigma 1 for t1 times on c1, on configuration c, I'll get back the same configuration, right? It means it is repeated. Same states are being repeated here. So suppose, consider a 2D system. Suppose this blue part, a small part. Okay, a small sub configuration. Suppose I apply T1 in left side, T1 in one direction, and T2 is in a other direction. So I have two positive integers, T1, T2. Now, if it's periodic, then you'll see that this blue box is repeated again after applying T1 and T2, right? So similarly, if we don't apply T1 and T2 simultaneously, if you apply T1, then also you can get a blue box in left hand side also. So this is this is the meaning of periodicity. It is being used in every place. So this is actually C of x. X is any configuration, we can write it in this way: C of x plus ti ei, where ei is the coordinate vector. Okay. Well, now like before, let's consider CP set of all periodic configuration. Obviously, CP is proper subset of h to the power j to the power d, and then we can get we can consider GP is the restriction of G on the periodic configurations. Then we get a new global transition function GP from CP to CP. So like one, as I've said, periodic configuration. What is the meaning of periodic configuration? It means by knowing a small part, you can reproduce it over the whole cellular space. So that is, if you are in the system, knowledge of small part about the configuration is sufficient in that sense. So again, for the simulation purpose, these periodic configurations are important. Periodic configurations, it forms a torus when d equal 2. It is a you may look like the periodic configuration for d equal 2 in this way. So this is finite, na? This figure looks like it's finite. How about the configuration is infinite? How is possible? As I've said, this part is repeated over the whole lattice. As I've said, finite and periodic configurations are essential for effective simulation of CA. Come back to the neighborhood part. So neighborhood, this is the neighborhood vector M. There are two popular neighborhood for 2D CA. One is von Neumann neighborhood and Moon neighborhood. So this is the von Neumann neighborhood. So these terms in cellular automata literature, these two terms are very popular: von Neumann neighborhood, Moon neighborhood. And the figure I have shown here, this is the von Neumann neighborhood. The blue cell is still under consideration, and the white cells are the neighbors. So it is the 5 neighbors, the cell itself as well as its 4 nearest neighbors, and is the moon neighbors. So the cell, middle cell, and 8 other neighbors, orthogonal and diagonal. So all are considered here. All nearest adjacent cells are considered as neighbors. This is called moon neighborhood. Apart from this neighborhood vector, which we have used to define a cell automata, we sometimes use radius to define a cell automaton. Radius is nothing but number of consecutive neighbors in each direction. Okay, here r equal to 1. One neighborhood is r equal to 1 because only nearest neighbors are are considered as neighbors of the cell, right? And here you can see it is r equal to left hand side is the von Neumann neighborhood, is the von Neumann neighbors r equal to 2. You can see the structure. Please note the structure. So middle cell, then 8 adjacent cells and the other cells. This structure is called von Neumann neighbors with r equal to 2. And left hand side, right hand side, this is the moon neighborhood with r equal to 2. However, when we use the term moon neighborhood, we generally mean the nearest neighbors with r equal to 1, right? The first which we have shown, that is generally considered as the moon neighborhood or von Neumann neighborhood. The point is here, instead of neighborhood vector, we can use radius to define a cellular automaton or to get the neighbors of a cell. Okay. So now come back a special class of cell automaton. It's called elementary cell automaton. In the history of cell automata, elementary cell automata, this these cell automata, these are very important because they demand a good share of cell automata research. In fact, most of the cell automata research done till date, they are related to elementary cell automata, and this is really elementary. Why? This is one-dimensional CA, this is binary CA, right? Here d equal to 1, so system is one-dimensional. Only it has 2 states. It is having only 2 states, 0 and 1, and a cell depends only on its left neighbor and right neighbor. See here, big black cell is a cell under consideration. Its left cell and right cell, a cell depends on these 2 cells. So n is here minus 1, 0, and 1, or r equal to 1, you can say. So this system is very simple. You must appreciate that this is really elementary. One-dimensional, binary, nearest neighbors. Okay. Why it is so important? It has several reasons. It is very simple, very easy to implement, but it can show many important properties. Now, ECA rules was systematically studied by Stephen Wolfram, and he has a special style. He presented the rules in tabular form, like this way. See, if I present the domain values of the rule in the above the table, so x, y, z, I can get 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, because x, y, z it's a 3-input function, 3-input binary function. Now, for each rule, for each function, I'll have a next state. Okay, I'll have a next state. So, like for 0, 0, 0, it may be 0. For 0, 0, 1, it may be 1. 0, 1, 0, it may be 0, etc. I can get an 8-bit string. Now, 8-bit string, its decimal equivalent, according to Wolfram, I mean, the style followed by Wolfram, this decimal equivalent is called rule. So here I have written rule 90. So if this is 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 0, this is a binary sequence, its decimal equivalent is rule 90. Actually, this number 90, it represents this function. Similarly, rule 30, it represents another function, right? So how many functions are there? Obviously, 256 functions are there. So you have 256 number of rules, and as it is, numbered, its numbers start from 0 to 255. So as I've said, the importance of the ECA is, see, they are very easy to implement. As I've said, the system is really elementary. We call it ECA, real elementary, very simple. And its importance is they are very easy to implement. However, they can show many interesting property. Let's give an example, evaluation of ECA 90. Here, 0 is Cousin state. You can see 0, 0, 0 is 0. So 0 is Cousin state for rule 90. In fact, for rule 30 also, 0 is Cousin state. I have taken rule ECA 90 as example. Suppose this is my initial configuration. So all 0, only one element is 1. Now I am applying ECA 90. What I'll have this configuration. Why? See this part, all 0, left hand side, right hand side, all 0, they'll remain 0. But here, say 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, it will be 1. So I have written 1 here. 0, 1, 0 is 0. 0, 0, 1, 0, 0. You can see the table. So 0, 1, 0 is 0 here. And 1, 0, 0, this 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0 is 1. So I have written 1. And rest part will remain 0. So note that, like always, we apply the rule simultaneously on each cell, right? So from this configuration, I get this configuration. Now, if we further run the system, I'll get this configuration as if 1 is going out. This configuration, and so on. So if I plot the system, I'll get this kind of figure. It's very amazing. So I've started to see here black box is the it represents state 1, and 0 represents white represents 0. So you can see I've started with single 1, means single black box. Now if I plot in this fashion, I'll get this kind of diagram, right? See, it is beautiful because you can see equilateral triangle are being generated. So beautiful patterns you can see here. Okay, if you plot this one. Now take example of another example of ECA 30. In a similar way, if we run the system, we will get this kind of pattern. You can see in the previous case, we have much equilateral triangles, but here we have less number of patterns, right? Here less patterns. Okay, so this kind of diagram is called space-time diagram, where we plot the evolution, configurations in downward direction. So in the diagram, time moves in downward direction, and space is plotted in the horizontally, right? This diagram is called space-time diagram. This diagram is used to understand the behavior of this cell automaton. And see, ECA 30 has been ECA 30. This cell automaton has been used to generate random numbers, which was advocated by Stephen Wolfram. That is a very good random number generator. Anyway, based on this analysis, this kind of analysis, we shall start running cell automata from some configuration. Then you observe its behavior through space-time diagram. Based on that, Wolfram classified this elementary cell automaton in 4 classes: class 1, class 2, class 3, and class 4. Class 1 is the example I have given. It's very simple one. It evolves to homogeneous configuration. Here it is rule 32. It's very simple. First, I have given some random initial configuration. It suddenly become all 0. Very simple. Class 2, it evolves to periodic configuration. If you draw space-time diagram, you will get this kind of configuration. You'll see this kind of figure. This is a class 2 CA. Okay, so this is complicated compared to, it's not simple, not complicated class 2, but simple, but complicated than class 1. But class 3, the rule 30, the example I have shown, if you start with random initial configuration, you'll see this kind of complicated behavior. They show the chaotic behavior, right? So class 2 cell automata, they're interesting because the simple cell automaton. So you can see the 30 is very simple rule, but that simple rule can show this kind of complicated pattern, this chaotic pattern. So class 3 rules, they're the chaotic cell automaton. And finally, maybe the most interesting is class 4. It's called complex structure. rule 110 here. I am given an example is given. This is not so chaotic like class 3, not so simple like class 2. So class 4, as far as compulsory is concerned, this is in between class 2 and class 3. I'm saying it class 4, but somehow it is not so simple like class 2 and not so complex like, not so complicated like class 3. So complex structure, it shows, it is in between class 2 and class 3. And it was advocated by Wolfram that class 4 cell automata, like rule 110, it can show universal computation property. And it was proved later that rule 110 is capable of universal computation. So this is very amazing. Elementary CA, they are very simple, binary system. But that kind of cell automaton, when the cells act together, they can become even as powerful as universal Turing machine. Okay, till now, what we have considered, what we have covered, that is based on the finite cell automaton, infinite cell automaton, because lattice size was infinite, right? Although we have discussed about finite configuration, but lattice size was infinite. But if you want to implement a cell automata, in hardware and software, you have to consider the finite cell automata. So finite cell automata received a huge attention since late 1980s, especially by the engineers, the researchers who want to use cell automata for application purpose. So let us briefly discuss what is finite cell automata. So we have defined cell automata as quadruple. First was lattice, S, M, and R. So this definition, this is our old definition. What I have done here, I have slightly, instead of writing J to the power D, I have written here L. So L is subset of J to the power D, is D-dimensional lattice. This is our old definition. Now this cell automata, this cell automaton is finite if L, the lattice, is finite. Okay, we have a definition. Cell automaton is a quadruple, L, S, M, R. If L is infinite, it is a classical cell automata or infinite cell automaton. And if L is finite, it becomes finite cellular automaton. The point is, this L is actually lattice. Lattice has to be property to satisfy. I mean, L is to be additive subgroup of J to the power D, or it has to satisfy the discreteness. Question is, if I take arbitrary L, will it form a lattice? So I have to test whether a finite L forms a lattice or not. So I'm giving an example. Say, suppose D equal to capital D equal to 1. So then Zn, consider Zn equal to 0, 1, n minus 1, where it is a set of integers modulo n. Now see, this forms a lattice because it forms a group under addition modulo n. And the second property, so subgroup property is satisfied, and second property, discreteness, is always satisfied. So therefore, if I take finite L, which is subset of J to the power D, this this can form a lattice. So point is, to be cell automaton, this L, which is subset of J to the power D, it is to be a lattice. So the properties are to the other properties, the properties of lattice, they have to be satisfied. So here I am showing for 1D case that okay, they are satisfying. In this case, since number of cells is finite, so there is a boundary. There was no question of boundary in case of infinite C. But here the number of cells is finite, right? So then you have to fix the boundary. What are the boundaries? So you have to specify the boundary condition. So there are two popular boundary conditions: one open boundary condition and periodic boundary condition. Open boundary condition is missing neighbors of cells assumed from specific state. Take this figure. Suppose this is my 2D system. Suppose here, so some cells, the border cells, they have some missing neighbors, right? And what I've assumed, the missing neighbors, they are always in some specific state. Say in state 0. This cell automata has a special, this boundary condition has a special name called null boundary condition, because I have given here 0. Open boundary condition is popular But in this open boundary condition, most popular is null boundary condition, where the missing neighbors consider that they are always in state 0. For one-dimensional case, if you have n number of cells, so first cell and last cell, they are grounded. Means, left neighbor of first cell, is considered always in state 0. Right neighbor of the rightmost cell, they are considered always in, state 0. So this is a null boundary condition. On the other hand, in case of periodic boundary condition, lattice is spatially periodic. For one dimension, it forms a circular array. And here you can see usually that periodic boundary condition is actually equivalent to periodic configurations, right? So what you have studied in the name of periodic configurations, they can also be studied by this finite system under periodic boundary condition. So this is the importance of periodic boundary condition. You can study the infinite CA, which uses the periodic configurations. How we can study? How we can study this infinite system? By using periodic boundary condition. For the finite CA, there is another tool, very popular tool. I have already introduced one tool called space-time diagram, right, to understand the dynamical behavior of cellular automata. Okay, space-time diagram you can use for finite CA, infinite CA, any kind of CA you can use that diagram. But transition diagram is specially used to understand the dynamical behavior of finite CM. Okay, and finite CA, sometimes you can see it is behaving like a finite state machine, right? So transition diagram is a diagram that represents the predecessor-successor relationship of all configuration. So suppose L equal to Z3, so N equal to 3, consider N equal to 3. I mean 3 cells are there, and S is 0, 1, 2, and R is 1 for periodic boundary condition. So you can have, I have given example of 2 cell automata, right? So here decimal equivalents are the configurations. Okay, the decimal numbers within the circles, they are the configurations, and the arrows, they show the transition from one configuration to another configuration. So this is called the transition diagram, right? So this is very useful to understand the behavior of cellular automata. I mean finite cellular automata. So next thing, so just before conclusion, let me introduce the linear cell automata. See, till now we have talked about infinite cell automata, finite cell automata, and other things. And
সুগত আমি একটু বেরিয়ে যাব
okay,
বলছি হ্যাঁ
okay. So this is a class of cellular automata called linear cellular automata. Now, a CA is linear if its global transition function is a linear map, right? So if global transition function follows this property, follows this one, if it's a linear map, then we call the cellular automata as linear cellular automata. Obviously, all cellular automata are not linear cellular automata. So what is linear map? Let us consider two vector space W and V over a field K. Then a function f from W to V is called linear if following two conditions are satisfied. First one is additivity. It's very primitive one. It's additivity and homogeneity with degree 1. Additivity is f of x plus y equal to fx plus fy for all x in W, and homogeneity means f of alpha x equal to alpha of fx. So these two properties are to be satisfied. So if these properties, linearity properties, satisfied by a global transition function of a CA, then the CA is called linear, right? And here, let us consider the configuration space as vector space. In case of linear CA, configuration space is considered as vector space. And there is the interesting theorem. A CA LSMR is linear if and only if the function and the next function R is linear. So let me give outline of the proof. So assume that G is linear, right? Then you consider two arguments of rule R, say S1 to Sm and S1 dash to Sm dash. So now consider R of S1 to Sm plus S1 dash to Sm dash. Okay, we can do this kind of operation. Then what I get, this is actually nothing but G of C plus C dash over I. Right? Suppose I am applying this rule in say cell I, and C and C dash are two configurations. Right? So then S1 to Sm, this is, you know, this is part of one configuration C, and S1 dash to Sm dash is part of another configuration, say C dash. Okay, so I'm putting you know, G of, so I'm considering, so what is the output of this? R of these two things, it will give some output, and suppose output is stored in cell number I, right? Cell number I. So I have taken cell I. So this is equal to G of C plus C dash restriction over I. And now this is equal to, since G is linear, following my additivity property, I can write G of C plus G of C dash restriction to I. Okay, so therefore I can write from this R of S1 to Sm plus R of S1 dash to Sm dash. So therefore additivity property is satisfied. Similarly, I can show that homogeneity property is also satisfied. Consider alpha equal to alpha is any state of S, then alpha dot R of S1 to Sm is equal to alpha of G into C and G of C over I. Then since G is linear, and so using the homogeneity property, I can get equal to G of alpha dot C. So is equal to R into alpha dot S1 to Sm for I. So therefore, when I assume G is linear, then I can see that R is also linear. Right? Right? Hence R is linear. Now similar way, if I assume that R is linear, then we can show that G is also linear. That I have not shown here, but you can show it easily using the same logic. Now what is the importance here? Importance here, say G, be it finite, I mean the CA, be it finite, be it infinite. If your local rule R is linear, then your cell automaton is also linear. So you have to test whether R is linear or not. This is one thing. And why we are interested in linear CA? The point is, linear CA is very simple. I mean, easy to characterize. Not very simple. I should not say very simple, but it is easy to characterize. Why? Because you can get help of standard mathematics. You can you can get help of, say, vector algebra. Similarly, matrix algebra, you can get help. So using this already established tool, you can characterize linear cell automata. So in the course of last 30 years, especially from the middle of 80s, people concentrated on this linear CA because they are easy to characterize. Okay, so today in this workshop, several talks you'll see that and you'll see many applications where linear cell automata will be explored. Okay, that's all. So thank you for your attention. Although I have taken almost 1 hour, 1 hour I have taken. So I shall be happy if you have to hear your question. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. And one more thing, I have a tutorial. So I'll share the tutorial with you, with all the participants. Okay. So what I've said here, you can find those things in that tutorial document. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your enlightening talk. So now it's the time to discuss the question answer. So is there any question?
Yes, I'm with one question. So at the starting of your lecture, you have said that two type of configurations, finite configuration and periodic configuration, and you have said that the periodic configuration actually shows a sense of infiniteness. So is it right? The periodic configuration is so then at the latter part of your lecture, you have, while talking about periodic boundary condition, you then that time you have said that that periodic boundary condition is something similar to the periodic configuration. So suppose I am working with a 1D 4 cell CA with periodic boundary condition, then I can imagine I am working with a infinite CA. Is it possible to?
Yes, right. What happens here, if it's 4 cell, see that part is repeated over the whole lattice, So 4 cell, then again 4 cell, then again 4 cell. You can see. So that is actually repeated. The
but
other part, yeah, please.
But the dynamics, whatever I'm getting from the sense of my infiniteness, is it possible if we restrict to some smaller number of cells?
Yeah, it's possible. Yes, possible. You'll get same dynamics.
Okay, thank you.
Same dynamics you'll receive. Okay.
Okay, any more question? Yeah, actually,
Sir,
any more
I have-
questions?
Yeah, sir, I have question regarding the like on the same line as Rubik said. So, what if we consider a finite configuration with 0 as the present state, and we take null boundary condition? Will there be any kind of relation in between these two type of CAs? CA with null boundary,
Yes.
where we are considering 0 as the boundary. Maybe we are taking all possible CA of any size, say n over all set of all naturals with null boundary condition, and we are taking the finite configuration with 0 as a quiescent state. Can it be possible that there will be some kind of relation between these two type of CAs?
It is very possible. Yeah, it's possible, I guess. But final configuration and null boundary condition in general, they can be same. They can be same. There are differences. But if you talk about some kind of relation, yeah. Suppose 0 is your quiescent state. If 0 is your quiescent state,
Yeah.
okay, then you can get some kind of relation. But let's see, in case of finite in a finite CA null boundary condition, the size of finite configuration is fixed. Suppose you have in one dimensional case, you have only one. See, you have only say n cells. No matter how much time you write, size of your finite configuration is bounded by this n. Whereas in case of if you consider finite configuration, the example I have shown for 90, for 30. So here size of finite configuration that increases, right? That is not possible because of null boundary condition. So maybe some kind of relation you can find out, but they are not same in general.
Thank you.
Okay. So if there is no question, may I stop this presentation? Okay.
Subhanadi, you are muted.
Yeah, actually, we are ending the session as there is no more question. So next we will meet at 12 noon, and the talk will be delivered by